Opening the Door of Your Heart. By Ajahn Brahm. Story number 1, Precious Stones. At a famous U.S. business school some years ago, a professor delivered an extraordinary lecture on social economics to his graduate class. Without explaining what he was doing, the professor carefully placed a glass jar on his desk. Then, in view of his students, he brought out a bag full of stones and placed them one by one in the jar, until no more would go in. He asked his students, "Is the jar full?" "Yes," they replied. The professor smiled. From beneath the desk, the professor produced a second bag, this one full of gravel. He then managed to shake the smaller stones into the spaces between the bigger stones in the jar. A second time, he asked the students, "Is the jar full?" "No," they answered. They were on to him by now. They were correct, of course, for the professor produced a bag of fine sand. He managed to coax much of the sand into the spaces between the stones and the gravel within the jar. Again, he asked, "Is the jar full?" "Probably not, sir, knowing you," the students replied. Smiling at their answer, the professor brought out a small jug of water, which he poured into the jar full of stones, gravel and sand. When no more water would fit in the jar, he put down the jug and looked at his class. "So, what does this teach you?" he asked his students. "That no matter how busy your schedule," offered one of the students, "you can always fit something more in." It was a famous business school, after all. "No," thundered the professor emphatically. "What it shows is that if you want to get the big stones in, you have to put them in first." It was a lesson in priorities. So what are the big stones in your jar? What is most important to fit into your life? Please ensure that you schedule in the precious stones first, or you'll never get around to them, to fit them into your day. Perhaps the most precious of stones to have in our jar early, as in the previous story, is inner happiness. When we have no happiness inside us, we have no happiness to give to others. So why do so many of us give such low priority to happiness, postponing it to the very end? Or even after the very end, as the following story will show. When I was 14-year-old, I was studying for my O-level examinations in a high school in London. My parents and teachers advised me to stop playing soccer in the evenings and weekends, to stay at home instead, giving the time to my homework. They explained how important the O-level exams were and that if I did well, then I'd be happy. I followed their advice and did very well. But it didn't make me that happy. That was because my success meant that now I must study even harder, for another 2 years, for the A-level exams. My parents and teachers advised me to stop going out in the evenings and weekends, to stop chasing girls now rather than chasing a football, and to stay at home instead and study. They told me how important the A-level exams were and that if I did well, then I'd be happy. Once again, I followed their advice and did very well. Once again, it didn't make me very happy. Because now I had to study hardest of all, for 3 more long years, for a degree at a university. My mother and teachers, my father was now dead, advised me to steer clear of the bars and parties in college, but instead to work hard and long at my studies. They told me how important a university degree was, and that if I did well, then I'd be happy. At this point, I started to become suspicious. I saw some of my older friends who had worked very hard and got their degree. Now they were working even harder in their first job. They were working extremely hard to save up enough money to buy something important, say, a car. They told me, when I have enough money to buy a car, then I'll be happy. When they had enough funds and had bought their first car, they still weren't happy. Now they were working hard to buy something else, and then they'd be happy. Or they were struggling in the turmoil of romance, looking for a partner in life. They told me, when I get married and settle down, then I'll be happy. Once married, they still weren't happy. They had to work even harder, even taking extra jobs, to save up enough money for a deposit on an apartment. Or even a small house. They told me, when we have bought our own home, then we'll be happy. Unfortunately, paying off the monthly installment for the house loan meant that they still weren't very happy. Moreover, they would now start a family. They would have children to wake them up at night, swallow up all their spare money and increase their worries in quantum leaps and bounds. Now it will be another 20 years before they could do what they wanted. So they told me, when the kids are grown up, have left home and settled, then we'll be happy. By the time the kids had left home, most of the parents were staring at retirement. So they continued to postpone their happiness, working hard to save for their old age. They told me, when I retire, then I'll be happy. Even before they retired, and certainly after, they started becoming religious and going to church. Have you ever noticed how many old people occupy the pews in a church? I asked them why they were now going to church. They told me, because when I did, then I'll be happy. For those who believe that, when I get this, then I'll be happy, their happiness will be just a dream in the future. It will be like a rainbow 1 or 2 steps ahead, but forever just out of reach. They will never in their life, or after, realize happiness. Ajahn Brahm is a Buddhist monk, born and educated in the West but trained in the Thai forest tradition by his renowned teacher, Ajahn Chah. He is the abbot of Bodhin Yana Monastery in Serpentine, Western Australia, and the spiritual director of the Buddhist Society of Western Australia, the largest Theravada Buddhist organization in Australia. Witty and wise, Ajahn Brahm enjoys nothing more than a cup of tea, not to mention sitting in meditation in a small forest hut.
The awakening mind is your true nature. Subscribe to Lotus Happiness to unleash the greatest potential within you.